Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Leadership Impact. My name is Matthew Devine, and this week I have had the opportunity to invite one of my colleagues, Moustapha Seck, to join me in discussion around the working relationship that he and I have had for a number of years, but also to get his views on what it means to be a senior leader in a startup company, but talk about leadership in general, and just give all of you a chance to be involved in that discussion, get a chance to sort of see how we work together, and see some of the challenges that he faces as a leader in an organization. So, Moustapha, welcome. How are you
Thank
today?
you for having me, Matthew, and thank you for everyone that's tuning in right now to listen to my story and my partnership with Matthew. So maybe should I
Yeah,
introduce
why
myself
don't you
briefly?
just give yourself like a high level, like who are you and how do we know each other?
100%. So my name is Moustapha Seck. I'm the CEO of Fluid Finance, which is a company that helps smallholder farmers create wealth in Africa. What that means in concrete terms is that we help financial institutions like banks, NGOs, et cetera, um, provide loans, input loans to farmers. And we help through those input loans, the farmers get access to things like seeds, mechanization, fertilizer that are typically very difficult for them to get and then increase their yield. And at the end of the season, we help them sell those crops and essentially increase their economic output. Prior to doing this, I had a very different career. I met Matthew at Hydro One when I was interning there during my electrical engineering degree. And since then, I honestly consider Matthew to be a mentor for almost 10 years of working together. And after I left Hydro One, I had the chance of working in a variety of startups. I worked notably at Clearbank, which really helped me develop a passion for finance. It was a fintech startup. It is a fintech startup that is operating out of Toronto. And I developed a passion for risk management, finance, which ultimately led me to building Fluid today and being able to take some of my learnings in Canada and applying them within the African context.
Thank you. And the work that you're doing in Fluid, it sounds very technical, with the financial piece, but the thing that I get inspired by is that you're actually making a real difference on the ground. Like, yes, you're
Absolutely.
providing financial tools. Yes, you're providing the mechanization, the seeds, and the tools that people can use. But ultimately, there are real people on the ground that are now able to grow their crops, sell their product to market that wouldn't have otherwise been able to do it. And you're having a real impact to real people. And that's the thing that draws me in to the work that you do, because it's not just some financial piece, which is important. It's you're making a difference for real people.
Absolutely. I think the team collectively is extremely blessed to be part of what we're doing and to be given the chance of working with the people that we're working with. And ultimately, we're going to get into this a lot of what pushes us to be on the ground and really be working with people, in farms and living on farms for extended periods of time it's an important mission. And it is
Mm.
something that requires to have a extremely intimate relationship with the people that we're serving. Otherwise, like many other institutions before us, we'll just misunderstand them and do a lot of stuff, but not necessarily create an impact for them.
Mhm, mhm. Now that thinking, this idea of understanding the people that you're working with is something that has evolved over time. Maybe you could just take us back and explain to us the sort of the journey of Fluid, the idea and
All right.
what ended up happening and how did I come into the picture working with you
Absolutely.
on this with
Absolutely.
this company?
I think what I would like people to get out of this is understanding how valuable and critical it is to work with someone like you. And for me, I was fortunate to work with you for, you know, uh, close to 5 years, 4 years now. And
It's been a
it
few
is,
years.
yeah, it's been a few years at least. And from the beginning, I think things that even go beyond leadership, we've managed to do together. We've managed to do together, and I want to talk about them. I think I want to take us back to the time that I was at Hydro One, right?
Okay.
And I think you remember that I was quite an eccentric guy. I was trying to put up initiatives, even though I was an intern in a big old institution that is really
Hmm.
important for Canadians and people that live in Ontario, right? And one of
Hmm.
them was the co-op student union. And I remember that, the union was there before me, but I tried to uh, uh, bring a certain dynamism to it and really try to make it do things that it hadn't done before. And you gave me an advice then that carried me through the beginning of my journey at Fluid, which was find people that believe in what you believe. And that was really important because then we try to go and get co-op students like myself that wanted to do something extra than just sitting on a desk from 9 to 5 and grinding it out. And I think that was really important. And how does that tie into Fluid? That ties into Fluid because when we started out in the business, obviously it's a very difficult business. You have to be in rural areas. You have to work, in an environment in which there's nothing and build something from scratch. And that idea of finding people that believe what I believe was really what I took and carried with me to build the first iteration of our team. My thing was I needed to find people that really identified with the mission of the business. And I'm going to talk about what that means in a second, and also had execution ability. And when it comes down to identifying with the mission of the company, how I took your advice and kind of expanded on it was saying, if Fluid was a person, and Fluid was a person with the mission to help smallholder farmers create wealth, what type of person would Fluid need to be? What would
Hmm.
their interests need to be? What would their attitude need to be? How would they even need to approach work to be able to accomplish this mission? And one thing that we did together that was extremely important to crystallize that idea. And that's, I think, the first thing that we did together, right? Which was writing a culture doc.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know, that was something that was extremely important for the business because when we are able to personify the business and say, who does this business need to be to accomplish those objectives and write that down, then that was what we used to be able to hire people. We needed to find
Hmm.
people that were comfortable being on the field, to work with farmers, to be on a farm and to be in uncomfortable situations at times. And we went and hired that. And now today we have maybe 80% of the company is actually farmers.
Yeah. And creating
Right.
that culture document is such an important piece for an organization to understand who are you? What do you stand for? What
Absolutely.
are the values that are important? What are the things that you want to prioritize, not only with the people that you hire into the organization, but also the mission outside the organization to get clear on what are you ultimately trying to do when your employees show up at work? What are they trying to do? More than just simply the tactical, technical aspects of their job, but conceptually, like by their values that they're bringing to those customer interactions, to the interactions with the other stakeholders in the business, and creating that framework, creating those sets of principles and values can really help define what an organization can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that for us, it was such an important document because it even went beyond the realm of recruitment and knowing who we wanted on the team. It became how we communicated to customers. And what is
Hmm.
really interesting is when at the beginning, I don't think that you need to spend too much time on setting HR strategies and things of the sort. I think that really you need
Hmm.
to you need to set a very clear idea of who you are and what are your values. Everything else is going to change, right? You
100%.
don't really understand your
100%.
business, but you need to understand who you are and where you want to go. That might change, but who you are and what are the core values, that's something that probably is going to stay with you forever. And it's greatly influenced by who you are as a founder. And I
Hmm.
think what I love about it is and even today, when I meet someone that wants to start a company, I tell them before you hire people, try to write down a document saying, who is this company? Right. And that really helps you because then you can set behavioral questions that screen to get that type of individual in your company. And then what is beautiful is when they start adding their flavor to the culture of the company because they've embraced it, they understand it so much, and they make it their own.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm going to jump in on one of the things you said because you talked a brief moment about, at the beginning, you don't want to say, worry about HR strategy. And from an HR background, I come from a human resources background. I just wanted to touch on that because I know that you do have an idea about HR strategy. But my understanding is when you're creating the organization in the first place, when you're starting up, that period of time is not the time to worry about a big people strategy. What can you just give a sense as to why that's not the right time to have your people strategy just yet?
There's really two reasons. The first and foremost, at that time, your priorities need to be elsewhere. You need to make the business survive. And your
Hmm.
bandwidth, so to speak, should not be spent on, oh, this is how our leave policy needs to look like. This is how we need to address things that are really more operational and more tactical and more mundane. That's the best word that I can use for it. What you really need to focus on in the beginning is how is this company going to survive? That's extremely important. And how am I going to bring the maximum amount of value to my customers and to the world actually, right? So that's reason
Hmm.
number one. Reason number two is really because there's just too much chaos. Something that is not really discussed about is that at least for me, at the beginning of our journey, our turnover rate was high. So are you going? It's harder to set systems for a team that is changing so quickly and so rapidly, right? Maybe that's Fluid's journey, but I do know that at the time it was more important to tell people, hey guys, this is how we become successful. Go and make it happen. But then that doesn't mean that you don't need advice. And people management and leadership should not be something that you should think about. Actually, no, it's something that you should really think about, but at a tactical level, not at a strategic level. What that
Hmm.
means is saying, for instance, okay, I'm dealing with this employee right now, and we're going through, a disagreement, or even with my co-founder, I'm going through this disagreement, or I'm anticipating that this disagreement is going to take place on something tactical, right?
Hmm.
And you need assistance to be able to deal with that. So I think, for instance, 2 years ago, most of our conversations, Matthew and I, were about tactical issues. Hey, I'm seeing this in the team. I don't like it. How do we make this happen? Hey, I think that this workflow or this way we go about this particular task is not the best. How do we make that happen? I need to have a tough conversation with this individual. How do I make sure that it doesn't take away from the bigger purpose that we have together? And that's that tactical advice that you need to go from 0 to 1 because it's just such a chaotic environment.
And I remember, many conversations to build on that, where it's a matter of like, do you keep the person you have in that role, or do you replace them? Like how much time do you spend developing and trying to make sure that they are rising to the level that you need them at versus hiring somebody who's already at that level? There's no right answer to that. And you and I,
No,
went back and forth on a few cases trying to figure
right,
out where the balance is for those individuals.
right. I think that's extremely important, and I think that one thing that becomes evident when you start a business is that uh, you can't be caught up with the mistakes that you make. You have to try your best to make the least operational mistakes as possible versus experimental mistakes. And what that means is simply something that you've done before, try not to make mistakes about that, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but when it comes down to making to making a decision around, you know, can this person get to this level? Should we hire someone to oversee this particular process? My advice is trust your gut, but be quick to change your mind if you see that something doesn't work. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to, hey, do I need to fire this person? Do I need to keep them? But as a founder, I think that because you have built the business from 0 to 1, your gut feeling is real, and you have to
Mm.
listen to it. And if you see that something doesn't work, you have to act quickly on it. Maybe that's something that makes me different as a founder is that I'm quick to promote and I'm quick to fire, for instance. To date, actually, I'm still like that because I think that when we see positive signs, it's important to try to reinforce them and try to set that as a standard for everyone quickly so that the organization quickly adapts to that new standard and tries to get there. Likewise, if you see something that we don't like, then it's important to either correct it in private and be able to say, hey, we'd like change this behavior. We need you to get here.
Mhm.
But I think that lingering, especially at the early stages, on mistakes or not being quick to make decisions, is actually much more dangerous to the business than being indecisive.
And I want to draw that point out because when I when I think of you and Mustafa, one of the things that I respect in your leadership ability is your clarity around making decisions.
Right.
And I know that you have doubts, and I know that you you
Talk
make a
about them often.
decision, and there are questions like, did I do the right thing? And you're like, I know you engage the work, and at the same time, you are also clear, and you communicate that clearly to the obviously to me when we work together, but I know you're doing the same thing for your team as well. And I think when it comes to leadership, that being able to make a decision is critical, and having the confidence to make to go left or right, whatever that decision is valuable for the employees, for the people that are working under you to feel like the organization's moving in a direction they can trust. And you make those decisions and you embody confidence in
Right.
the choices that you make, even though internally you may be you're questioning things.
Right. I think what I would like to say about that is that comes from really two elements. The first and foremost, it comes from being close to the customer. There's a reason why we spend so much time on farms. There's a reason why we spend so much time with even our financial institutions that are our customers, right? It's because we really want to understand them. And I think that the better you understand who you're serving, not at the first level, meaning what they tell you they need, for instance, but what is their environment like? What are the macroeconomic difficulties that they face? In Africa, it's ripe with macroeconomic difficulties. So once you're able to understand that, then it becomes very clear how to actually make an impact in their life. I tend to think that founders don't spend enough time talking to their customers, and that affects the way that you manage your team. Because if you're unsure where you're going, you're not going to lead people right to get there, right? I think when it comes down to having a certain amount of confidence, once you have that understanding, I think it just comes down to being fine with making mistakes. My belief is that once you understand what the macroeconomic environment is of your customer, what the bigger picture looks like, making mistakes on your way there is not a big deal. So long as you're able to correct them. There's very few mistakes that are that you can't reverse. And that's also something that's important, even when it comes to elevating yourself, right? From going from being essentially the key decision maker in almost all the decisions when you're a founder, to letting management, people that you've hired, make those decisions. They're simply saying, hey, they're going to make mistakes. That's fine. So long as we are riding the macroeconomic wave in the right direction, right?
And that's a journey you've been experiencing over the last couple of years, is moving from that very hands-on, being the one in the meetings, making the decisions, to now being the person who has a management team who are able to sit in those meetings and make those decisions. And now you can spend time focusing on other things. Can you describe a little bit more about what that experience has been like, moving
It's a
out
tough
of
experience.
the frontline decision-making role into the more strategic position?
It's a tough decision. No, it's a tough process in the sense that it is really emotionally difficult more than anything. I don't think that for us it was difficult from an operational standpoint. I think we hired the right people from the beginning. I'm very fortunate for that. But certainly emotionally it's difficult for you as a leader, and it's difficult for them as well. And the two emotional forces that are really difficult to overcome are, first and foremost, you're used to making all the decisions. And so it's hard to let it go. And that's a human thing, right? But you have to really understand that if you don't manage to let those things go, you're not able to take the business to, making, for instance, from $1 million to $5 million. You have to be able to get there, right? And the second element is it's hard for the employees at times as well. And that's something that I still do, which is weaning employees off. When, for instance, someone goes from being an individual contributor to being a manager, sometimes they don't understand where their decision making limit is. So for instance, they will ask you a question that clearly they should be answering by themselves. And you have to have the courage to say no at that time. Kind of like, when it's time to sleep train a child, you have to let the child cry in their room until they figure out how to sleep by themselves, right?
And now
That's
I'm picturing your poor managers going off and crying in their room when you
that's
told them
exactly, yeah,
no.
it's terrible. It's terrible, but that's really what has to happen, right? It's something that it's something that takes a lot of time, but it's also something that needs to be a feedback process. I think that people love to be empowered, and when you discuss it from a theoretical standpoint and you tell people what you're going to do before you're doing, like for instance, us when we're about to promote someone, we tell them
Mhm.
this is what's going to happen. You're going to have to make decisions for yourselves. You're going to make mistakes. Those are the things that we accept. Those are the things that will be a problem if you do, right? And giving them that heads up before getting there, I think that's something that's also important.
Mhm.
Maybe also as well, let me just expand on that point. So giving them tools, something that now I'm thinking about that we have even done in the past is, send our management team to talk to people that are outside the company to be able to develop themselves, right? And say, hey, what does an operation manager in a different company do? What does a chief of staff in a
Mm.
different company do? And helping them build those relationships so that even if one day they have something that's hard for them to talk to you about, they have an avenue to discuss with someone else and reach the conclusions themselves. And that's something also that I think should be done because some a founder is going to listen to me and say, hey man, that takes too much time, but it's an investment that pays dividends down the line, because when they're able to be a little bit more autonomous, that allows you to really focus on a bigger picture.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting when it comes into a startup company as you're beginning to grow, is recognizing that there are going to be people in the marketplace who are further, they have their own companies that are further along the way that can help teach and train some of your people on how to do some of these things, because a lot of what you're doing, you're experimenting, you're creating at every step along the way, and you're pushing into
Absolutely.
areas that your team has never done before or likely has never had to handle before. And
Right.
learning from other people who have that experience they can then translate that into the fluid experience, and apply that learning, because
And
you as the CEO can't know everything. You know a lot, but you can't know everything. So
right,
I think that's a really good strategy for helping expand the knowledge and develop the confidence of your
right,
employees.
right. And I think what founders sometimes tend to, or even leaders, I won't even say founders, but just anyone that's in leadership often fails to realize that people really want to see you win. We have this conception that, if I ask questions, I'm bothering people, or people don't want to be part of my trials and tribulations, right? And I think that very often you'd be surprised when you ask people questions, especially people that are just a little bit further along the way than you. Those people typically tend to be very, very helpful. There's something that Steve Jobs once said that, you know, I, I realize in my life is that very rarely will people tell you no. If you ask for advice, if you ask for money,
Mm.
it's different. But if you're asking for advice, very rarely will people tell you no, because you might be the only person, because everyone else is afraid to ask them for that advice, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, I encourage people to understand that they are not out there. There's people that are looking at you from a distance that want you to win.
I love that. In fact, I made a note. People want to see you win, because I think that applies not just for leadership. I think it applies generally. This sense of, asking for advice, because if people who are more experienced, who have that knowledge, what they give you is gold. Yeah, you could
Right.
get money, but the wisdom that can come from that kind of advice can help guide you in the right direction. So um, this applies more than leadership. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's an
It goes. Yeah,
excellent observation, and
right.
something that, I'm sure all of us can benefit from.
For sure. For sure. I'm, you know, I can really be witness of this this amount of support that you can get, or that you can even find for your management team, or for your employees in general, is extremely is overly abundant in the world, and that's
Mhm.
in Canada, that's in the US, that's in Europe, that's in Africa. Everywhere that I've lived, people were genuinely very, very open to, sharing their thoughts on how to address certain issues. Now, there's a question of selecting the right people, which is a whole different thing.
Right.
But overall, I think that that's a tool that leaders should be thinking about when it comes to themselves, but also to the people that they're managing, and almost using the gravitas that they have, to be able to pull people in, and make them allies to the success of people within their organization.
So, question for you, just to sort of wrap up the fluid piece. We've been on this journey. I've seen you grow this organization and grow yourself in your leadership skills. What's next for you? What do you see as the future for yourself and for the company?
I think from a people perspective, when a people show, so I'm going to talk about things that pertain to people management. I'm really keen on trying to build the best team in Africa when it comes to business, when it comes to a startup. I draw a lot of inspiration from Fidelity, the
Mm,
financial institution. Yes, Fidelity has a founder, but but if you follow the history of Fidelity, you're gonna remember Peter Lynch. You're gonna remember Jared Tsai,
mm,
really talented fund managers that have gone and really, been stars in their industry, and they were not the founders of Fidelity. I'm the founder of Fluid, but I am looking for those exceptional managers to really build the best company in Africa. That's really what I'm
mm.
looking forward to, what I'm excited about. I think beyond delivering value to our stakeholders, to farmers, to the financial institutions that we work with, from a people perspective, I'm really keen on building the best team ever. Um, and that's something that I'm looking forward to making happen over probably the next decade.
Amazing. Okay, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to ask you just one or two more questions from a
Absolutely.
leadership perspective to get your thoughts on it, because now you've been in this senior leader CEO role. You've got ideas on to manage a team, how to grow a company. Um, I heard once that leaders need to be their own chief communications officer. And one of the things that I've appreciated about you, Moustapha, is the charisma you bring to the messages you put out. Like,
Right,
I feel your determination and faith in building that business. And I know the people working for you feel the same.
right.
Can you comment on what it means to communicate from a leadership perspective? And what do you think about when you're wanting to make sure that people understand the messages that you need to share with them?
That's a very tough question. But I'll try to give it my best bet. I think there's certain elements that make messages stick. The first and foremost element and most important element is making sure that you understand yourself, what you're talking about. And that's something that, probably a lot of people have experienced in their career. You go and you meet your boss and they give you very vague advice, like, we need to be the most competitive, you need to be more aggressive. Those statements are fine, but by themselves, they are not very useful. What we really try to do at Fluid is try to distill our message in a way that everyone can understand, and try to, and if our strategies and if our ideas cannot be explained in a simple fashion, it means that probably they're half-baked.
Mm,
Even if, when we make a tough decisions, say for instance, selecting a fertilizer brand that is a little bit more expensive because we think it's going to increase the yield of farmers. If we're not able to explain very clearly why that is in a simple language, then probably that's not what we should be doing, because we're not really sure about what we're doing. The second element is repetition. I think that people have too many messages. And there's a one of my favorite actors, Benicio del Toro,
mhm,
said something once in an interview that I really love, which is that in some movies, he would remove lines of script, right? Because
Interesting. Same.
the 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 nonverbal communication and the silence would actually be more explicit and send a deeper message than being verbose, right? And I think it's the same when it comes to leadership. Have less ideas and communicate them more. Every single week, twice a week, we're going to tell people in our company, we're here to create wealth for smallholder farmers. We say it so often that people put it on their social media and their WhatsApp. I'm creating wealth for smallholder farmers because I work at Fluid X, and that's exactly
Mhm.
right? And being able to repeat messages over and over and over again. You sound like a broken clock, but it's important because as a leader, you know your communication is effective when the most junior person in your company is able to say what the strategic objectives are for a specific quarter. And you can, if someone that's a leader that can listen to me, can just do the test tomorrow. Go in your office or call or send a Slack message to the most junior person in your company and then say, what are our strategic objectives? And see how closely they match what you are actually intending on doing, right?
Mhm.
So repetition is really the second element that I can think of. I think those are really the two things: being simple, repeating, and I think also just something as simple as just being truthful. If you say something that is true to yourself, you might even be wrong in thinking that it is true. But if within your heart you think that you're right in what you're saying, people can pick up on that, and it sticks to them a little bit better than if you're trying to outsmart people, I would say.
I think that is very well understood. And having worked a lot in change management as well, the the idea of repetitive messages is so important to making sure people understand. And I'm sure if we were to talk to a salesperson, they would say the same thing about making sure that the customer understands what the product is and what the service is.
Right.
Mustafa, I
Simple
have one
language.
last
Often.
question for you.
Yeah.
One last question for you, and then we'll wrap up for today, which is I want you to picture yourself when we first met. You're a student working at Hydro One a few years ago. What is the piece of advice that you would give to young Mustafa?
This is something that I've done later on in my career, but I don't know if I wish that I had done it earlier, but become very, very good at listening.
Mm,
Very, very good at listening. And I think that that's out of all the skills that I had, my ability to listen closely to people and understand what they mean deeply um, in emotional situations at times has been probably the most important skill that I've gathered. And that's important because people think that leadership is about talking. Very often, leadership is about making people feel like you get them, right? When we sit down with farmers and we let them talk for 1 hour before giving any idea to them, when we really think about how we set up discovery calls with new partners, or even in one-on-ones, spending 40 minutes out of an hour just listening to the person, just asking question after question and digging deeper, I think that has been something that has made people want to work with me. I think it made my wife want to marry me as well. Uh, and I think that's something that is a superpower. If you're able to learn how to listen intently, learn how to ask better questions, then all of a sudden people are much more inclined to listen to you and to do what you say.
I think that's amazing advice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say today?
No, I think, well, I do have one message. I do have one
Okay.
message. Going back to building the best team. I'm going to be repetitive here. People listening to this and they're interested in working in Africa and they're interested in uh, being part of a team that wants to be the best team in Africa, then I invite them to talk to me, to reach out. Maybe we can't give you a role today, but we really want you to know who you are and to give you an opportunity when the time comes. Thank you.
Amazing. Mustafa, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me and talk to us about your experience at Fluid and your leadership journey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And
Okay.
see you next time.
Yeah, have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.